Hey everybody, welcome back to my coverage of the PogChamps 3 tournament. This is the Group B xQc versus Daniel Negreanu match, and both of these competitors are definitely two of the more skilled competitors in the tournament, so either of them could reasonably win the entire tournament even. Daniel is the small rating favorite, but I think xQc is actually a little underrated here. He has also participated in all three PogChamps. And his rating has been over that 1200 mark in the past. So I think either of these competitors could reasonably take this match, and I think we're in for a nice match. Without further ado, let's get right into the chess. We have e4 from Daniel. He has the white pieces in the first game. And will he get the Danish gambit that he likes to play? We have e5 and now d4, the Danish gambit. We have e takes d4 and c3 continuing to sacrifice material. This is the point of the Danish gambit. We have d takes c3 and now bishop c4, offering a third pawn. xQc, however, does not take it. He goes for knight f6, which is a perfectly playable move as well. And here, as Daniel, you really should take this pawn back with c3. It defends your e-pawn, and it also prevents black from pushing d5. And then you'll be down a pawn, but you'll get that lead in development. Really, you cannot play the move that Daniel played here, which is e5, because now you're just going to be down a pawn for nothing. You are gaining a tempo on this knight, but black has this very defensive resource, which is d5. And one other thing to know here is black can actually sacrifice this pawn by pushing it to c2 first, and this gains a tempo on the queen and forces the queen away from controlling the d file, which could be favorable later on. If you don't move this pawn, the knight is just going to capture it anyway. So that is one thing you can do here as black, but it's not necessary. d5 immediately is also very playable, which xQc finds, and so now black is going to get out of this opening and be up a pawn totally fine. So Daniel captures en passant immediately, and this allows xQc to recapture the pawn and develop, and he's going to castle very soon. xQc is going to get out of this opening very fine. So a bit of a misplay in the opening from Daniel, but that's just how things go sometimes. We have knight takes c3 and queen e7 from xQc, and now it looks like xQc is even the one that may be attacking white's king in the opening. So this Danish gambit really backfired on Daniel here. We have bishop e3 and now castles from xQc. Knight f3 continuing to develop, and now knight g4 from xQc. Just going after this bishop, so Daniel must defend it somehow. He does with the move queen e2, and now we have knight takes e3. Just picking up that bishop and forcing white to take this isolated pawn. If white takes with the queen, then we can take with the queen, and white will still have an isolated pawn. But white simply takes with the pawn, and xQc continues pressuring this pawn with rook to e8. This move is totally fine. Also possible are simple developing moves, knight c6, bishop g4. Either of those moves would have been fine, but rook e8 is also completely fine. So attacking this e-pawn once more, so Negreanu has to defend it, which he does with knight d5, attacking the queen and defending the pawn. One other move Negreanu could have played here is simply castling, and the idea here is after queen takes e3, first you trade queens, and now you play knight g5, and there's a lot of pressure on this f7 pawn, and you cannot move it because the bishop pins it to the king. So we could have something here like bishop to e6, and after knight takes e6, f takes e6, and rook a to e1, rook takes e1, rook takes e1, and you're going to be losing back this pawn. So white will still be down a pawn, but they'll have a lot of activity, and they could still probably hold a draw in this position. So this is one line that Negreanu could have gone for, but instead he simply plays knight d5, which is totally fine as well. This is attacking the queen, so will xQc see it? Yes, he does. He plays queen e4, and now we have castles from Negreanu. We have bishop e6, just trying to remove this defender of the knight so xQc can pick up the pawn, and we have knight g5 from Negreanu now, attacking this queen and also maybe looking to pick up this bishop on e6. We have queen e5 now, and this move threatens a lot of things. First, you're still threatening to capture this knight as there are two attackers and only one defender. Now you also have this battery aimed at h2, which could be bad for the white king, and also you're attacking this g5 knight. So really, here as white, you only have two moves you can play. You can play knight f3, getting another tempo on the queen and defending h2, saving your knight. Or you could play this move, which is queen h5, and this threatens some counterplay on h7 and potentially even f7. So we could see a line like h6, knight f6, h6, and now knight f6 check, a brilliant piece sacrifice because you just have too many things hanging, so you're going to lose a piece anyway. You may as well damage black's structure to continue your attack. And after g takes f6, we could have bishop takes e6, and this bishop must be captured since you're threatening things on f7. However, black has their own threats on h2. These are defended by the queen, but if we can, white has two pieces hanging anyway, so black can give up a piece on h2 first, and then take one of white's pieces later. They can get a pawn by doing this. So black does this with queen takes h2, and after queen takes h2, bishop takes h2 check, king takes h2, and h takes g5, bishop g4, and king g7, now defending this f pawn. Black will be up an exchange and up 2 pawns, so this would definitely be a very winning endgame for black, but it was one of white's options, and I will note that it's one of white's best options after this queen e5 move. However, we have knight f3. Oops, sorry. We do not have knight f3, which would have been much better. Instead, we have g3 from Negreanu, and maybe he just didn't see how to defend all of these threats, but this simply hangs two knights, actually. Black can take either knight here, but one of them is better to take than the other one, and xQc does take the right knight. He plays queen takes g5. This knight is slightly better to take than this knight because if you take this knight, then things could happen on f7 because there are these two attackers, and after the bishop captures and queen captures, we could have some stuff happening on this f7 square potentially. But we have queen takes g5, so good on xQc for capturing the right knight, and now xQc is up a piece and a pawn. We have rook a to d1 from from Negreanu, now just defending that knight, and xQc kicks it away with c6. We have knight f4 now, and xQc is up in material, so he is fine with those trades. He plays bishop takes c4, and here Negreanu, I think he may have still been a little flustered from losing this knight on g5, and he didn't see that this bishop was actually not defended, or maybe he was focused on this skewer that the bishop was giving on the queen and the rook. So I don't know if it was either of those things, but Negreanu did not recapture this bishop here. He simply played queen h5. I've noticed Negreanu sort of has this, it's kind of weird, like sometimes he will see like very nice tactical sequences, and other times he will simply miss a hanging piece. It's a little weird, but you know, some people just play like that. But we do have this queen h5 move, and not only is this a mistake because it's not recapturing this bishop, but also it's offering a queen trade, which xQc is totally fine with because he's up in material. So after queen takes h5, knight takes h5, xQc will be up even more material after bishop takes f1. We have rook takes f1, and now g6 from xQc, kicking away the knight. However, this does hang this fork on f6, so will Negreanu go for it? We have knight f6 check, so Negreanu does see it, and after king f8, knight takes e8, king takes e8. Black is still up 2 pieces and a pawn, so this is still very winning for black. So we'll see how xQc converts this. We have e4 from Negreanu, knight d7 getting that last minor piece developed, and rook e1. We have knight e5 now blockading that pawn, and king f2. Rook d8, xQc brings his rook to the open file, and here, after this king f2 move, xQc did have this chance to go for this knight fork and end the game immediately, but we have rook d8 and rook d8 instead, which is a totally fine move. You know, as long as you are getting all your pieces into the game, you will win this eventually. We have king e3 and now knight c4 check. xQc actually realized after he played this rook d8 that he missed this knight d3 move. But anyway, we have king e3 and knight c4 check, king d4, and now knight takes b2. So xQc getting that fork on the pawn and the king. He's just picking up some more material. We have king c3 attacking the knight, and knight a4 check. Here, once again, xQc could have ended the game immediately with bishop b4 check, and this is a skewer on the king and the rook, so it must be captured. But now black has this knight d3 check, which is a fork on the king and the rook, and will pick up the rook. So once again, xQc had a chance to end the game immediately here, but instead we have knight a4 check, king b3, knight c5 check, king c4, and now b5 check. A little dance with the king and the knight there for a couple moves. We have king b4 and now f5. And here as black in this endgame, obviously you want to, you basically just want to make a passed pawn and promote that passed pawn, and trade rooks if you can, and pick up hanging pawns if you can. And those are basically the three things you want to be doing in this game and the end game, and how you can win this end game as black. So xQc goes about it in sort of a roundabout way, but he does get there, and let's see how he does that. We have e takes f5, and this is actually a discovered check on xQc, so this f5 move was probably not the best. We have king f7, and here is Negreanu. You got to take this pawn because you don't want to lose another pawn. You know, if you get this kingside majority, then maybe you could have something. It will at least make your life a little bit easier. However, we have king a5 instead, which this avoids this knight d3 check, which was once again available for a little bit. So, you know, this f takes g6 move still would have been better because it would have been check, but we have king a5 instead. And now xQc does take this pawn with g takes f5, and now we have rook f1 trying to regain that pawn, but xQc defends with king f6. We now have king b4 and h5, king c3 and knight e4 check, king d3 now and c5, xQc pushing his passed pawn. We have king e3 and king e5, g4 now, and this just loses a pawn as Daniel. We have f takes g4 and now rook f4, knight c3, and now rook f7 from Daniel. We have rook f8 looking for that rook trade. This does give Daniel the opportunity to pick up this pawn and also defend his a pawn in the process, but instead Daniel decides to go for the h pawn. Now we have rook f3 check from xQc and king d2. We have b4, xQc pushing that passed pawn. Like I said, xQc is kind of doing this endgame in a disorganized way, but he is making progress, so that's good at least. We have rook takes h5 check and now king f4. So Daniel picks up a pawn. We have king c2 and now rook f2 check, king b3, and here xQc can obviously pick up this pawn, but instead we simply have g3. Looking to trade off this last kingside pawn. It's probably better to actually hold on to this pawn as xQc, but I mean, anything wins here as xQc. We have rook h4 check and now king f3. H takes g3, king takes g3, and there are no more kingside pawns. We have rook h6 from Negreanu and now bishop e5. Rook a6 going after this a pawn, and now rook f3. A tricky move from xQc because now you cannot take this pawn as Negreanu because there's knight b5, a discovered check, and that will pick up white's rook. So here's why you have to play a move like king c4, go after the c pawn and the a pawn, and just hope that xQc cannot. Basically, here's why you want to trade or win black's last three pawns, and then you could even trade rooks, but maybe xQc will not know how to checkmate with the rook, knight, or bishop. I can guarantee you xQc does not know how to checkmate with the knight and bishop. So if you win these three pawns and can trade the rooks, then you will basically get a draw here as Daniel. We have knight, so we do not see this king c4 move from Daniel. Instead, he simply goes for rook takes a7, and xQc does see this knight b5 check, and after king c4 and knight takes a7, here Daniel resigns. I do think this was a bit of an early resignation from Daniel. I think after king takes c5, he could have gone after this pawn, and maybe xQc would not know how to checkmate, or would not be able to checkmate with the rook, bishop, and knight, or maybe he would even stalemate, as xQc is famous for his stalemates. But Daniel does kind of the respectful thing, which is to resign in this position. So the first match goes to xQc, or first game goes to xQc, and we'll see if Daniel can bring us to an Armageddon in the second match, but second game, sorry. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say about this game or this match. So thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on all things chess. And Yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.